Hey guys, it's Kevin on the Murder Free guys. This we're reviewing. This is a movie that I was interested in, but was also very on the fence about. It is probably one of the last big, potential Oscar movies for this year. And that is none other than Alexander Payne's new film, Downsizing. And what Downsizing is essentially about is we center on the character of Matt Damon. He plays this character named Paul. And basically what Paul ends up discovering is that basically this Norwegian scientist has found a way to shrink humans to 5 inches tall as basically a means to stop the overpopulation within the world. And when Paul gets note of this, he sees this as a way to possibly turn his life around, and him and his wife Audrey, they plan on doing it, but things get a bit complicated when Audrey suddenly backs out, and Paul is forced to essentially navigate the world, the world of Leisureland and everything as 5 inches tall, and kind of find his new purpose. So Downsizing in general, like I said, I really did not know what to make of this movie. The first trailer, I was really on board with them. You know what, this sounds really creative and different, and it did sound like a relevant idea. It sounded like something that I do think we are eventually going to come to. I'm not joking with you guys when I say, I think we are going to get to a point in the world where we're going to get here, where the world's going to get so overcrowded that people are going to have to literally start shrinking down. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, given how advanced in technology, we are now, I could see it happening in I don't know, not a couple years, but definitely many years from now, I could definitely see it happening for sure. So that factor definitely very much interesting. The cast as well looks really great here. And it's Alexander Payne, who's never disappointed me. I fucking love The Descendants. It's probably one of my favorite George Clooney performances. I think he did an incredible job with that movie overall. I really do love everything about it. And Election's one of my favorite high school comedies of all time. Easily, in my top 10. So this movie definitely had a lot of potential for sure. And while Downsizing does explore some interesting ideas, just in general, this movie just did not come together at all. This film very much to me is a very broken movie that really is not about what I just said it is. That's what the trailer wants you to think the movie's about, but that's not what the movie's really about. Let's just get into it though, starting off with the cast. And I'm going to say right now, there are a lot of problems with this movie, but the cast is not one of them. I think, honestly, everyone did a really great job with what they had here. I do think every performance was definitely very strong. There wasn't really anyone that I felt like was phoning it in. But let's talk about Matt Damon, because, oh boy, what a year this has been for him. I'm sorry to say, once again, this is another very underwhelming Damon performance, and he's trying. He really is trying to make something out of this performance, but his performance just feels very one-note, and there are points of this movie where I wouldn't say he necessarily feels out of place, but he does do a good job for the most part. Paul as a character is just kind of a screw-up. He's someone who, and they allude to this several times in the movie, they say that basically, whatever he does, he just kind of fucks it up, and that's kind of where he ends up going within this film. He does a good job for the most part. I did like what Damon did here. I will definitely say, out of the 3 characters that Damon has played this year, this is definitely the best of the 3 for sure, but still not really all that great. And then Cristoph Waltz in this movie, I honestly really did enjoy. This is a very different role for him. He's playing this sort of party animal who's also middle-aged, and just the thought of that actually sounds very funny. And Waltz really is, I think, the highlight of this film. He was honestly a lot of fun to watch at points. I really did like his character. They use him a lot for comic relief, and I think he honestly did a really good job. He was a lot of fun to watch, and his interactions with his friend are probably some of the best of the entire film. I thought he was just a lot of fun to watch, and I honestly could have watched a whole movie just around his character. That's how much I really enjoyed him in this film. But then we have to talk about probably, I think, what's going to end up being one of the most controversial performances of the entire year, and that is Chau as a character of Naklan. And character aside, we'll get into her in a little bit, she does do a really great job here. Why? Chau is American, and the whole movie she's putting on this Vietnamese accent. Now, I haven't really heard of Chau prior to this film, but I think after this movie, this is really going to turn her into a bit of a breakout star because she really stays fully committed in this role. I mean, there's not a single time where I wasn't convinced that she was Vietnamese, and I think she honestly did a really great job here. Her and Matt Damon, I think, do actually have pretty good chemistry. I did like following them throughout the film. I thought overall she did a really great job, and I definitely do want to see more from her because I think she definitely does have a real future for sure. And then everyone else in this movie, they played their parts pretty well. Jason Sudekis, I did enjoy here. Kristin Wiig, I thought was pretty good. And there's a lot of cameos in this movie, some of which I definitely don't want to spoil. One that I was honestly really surprised about, but I thought was definitely very fun to watch. The cast here, like I said, they do a good job for the most part. The cast is definitely not the problem here. And now let's get to the directing and the writing, which... this is really where things take a nosedive, guys. Like I said, the movie in general just doesn't come together at all. I think one of the biggest problems with it is the tone. The tone for this movie is just completely wrong. The whole movie, it's playing as a satire, and it should be a lot of fun. It should be a fun movie to watch. The problem is the tone feels very jumbled. There are points in this movie where it gets very funny, and then it gets really serious, and then it starts to focus more on all these political issues, and it just doesn't feel very balanced in terms of tone. The humor really did not work a lot. There were not a lot of times I was laughing in this movie. I found a lot of the humor to fall flat here. Stuff that Cristoph Waltz was saying was definitely really funny, but a lot of the humor I definitely did find very flat. So yeah, like I said, definitely I was not a huge fan of what they ended up, with the script. I thought was definitely a huge problem here, but it's not nearly as much of a problem as the screenplay. And I'm going to say it right off the bat, I don't think the story is the problem. I don't think the places this movie goes is the problem. I think the big glaring error in this movie is the notion that this was meant to be a TV show, and, Alexander Payne was ready to turn this into a TV show, say on like HBO or Showtime or something, and for some reason it didn't get picked up to a series, and instead he turned it into a movie, and sometimes this tactic has worked. Mulholland Drive, for example, is a fantastic example of that. That movie, believe it or not, that movie was supposed to be a TV show originally, and of course it worked out as a movie. Downsizing, on the other hand, it doesn't really work here, and that's because in the middle of this film there is a significant tonal change, and the story very much changes, and it feels like a completely different movie. It really does. The entire script is so jumbled, and it really doesn't come together at all. And like I said, the plot line of this movie that I explained to you, that's not the real plot to this movie. That is the plot for the first 30 minutes of this movie. After you see on the screen something that says 1 year later, this movie completely changes, and it's not for the better. This movie honestly got worse and worse and worse as it goes on, and I think it's because it's a film that Payne had a lot to say, but again, he didn't really do a good job of condensing it into one singular film, and I think that definitely is a huge problem here. The movie does have some good messages about, climate change, and all this political stuff and things like that, and those are all good messages. Keeping the earth safe, those are good messages overall. But again, it doesn't really fit in this movie because the first 20 to 30 minutes of this movie is us focusing on Paul and Audrey's relationship and seeing these two struggling with downsizing. And that stuff is honestly very well handled. They really show the pros and cons of downsizing and what this could really do to them, how this could be, how this could really change their life, how this could really benefit them. All that stuff is so well set up, and especially the scene where we actually see him downsize, it's really well done. It's weird to watch, but it's honestly very well handled, and I thought they handled that stuff in a very well done manner, and Audrey's reasoning isn't very clear. They kind of explain it, but they kind of don't. So her reasoning in the movie doesn't really work out that well. But like I said, really, I think my biggest problem in this movie is the time gap. This movie jumps ahead a lot, and a big part of this movie, at least from the trailer, they make it seem like the movie's gonna be, all right, how does Paul move on now? But then we conveniently cut to 1 year later, so we don't really get to see what he endures, what he really has to go through, how he's able to move on from this, and how he's able to turn his life around. I mean, we don't really see that in this film, and I don't know why. It felt very out of place. Like, it felt like something was missing. I honestly felt like I missed something, but I didn't. The film cut away from it way too quickly, and like I said, it just didn't really work at all for me. And keep in mind, guys, prior to this movie, I was not aware of this time jump, but it honestly kills the entire film. After this, the film becomes Damon, and he's now settled into a new life, and he's got this next-door neighbor who's Cristoph Waltz, who, like I said, is really fun in the film, but he's not really much else than what I said. He's simply just someone he's a party animal, he likes to drink a lot, he likes to smoke, he acts kind of like a millennial even though he's middle-aged, and it's fun to watch. He does a good job in the role. Waltz plays the role very well, but it doesn't really do anything more than that. And especially when it comes to Chau's character. Oh my god, her character in this movie. Now look, again, the character I don't think is the huge problem here. The character is actually really interesting. She is a Vietnamese, she is a Vietnamese dissident who basically is in the world not because she wants to be. She was kind of forced to downsize, and she's now missing a leg, and all that stuff is very interesting. But the way Payne goes about this is very perplexing because, like I said, he's got a lot of messages that are environmentally friendly, and it's a very progressive movie in that way. But then when you factor in Chau's character, it feels completely out of place because her character is honestly handled in a very racist manner, and it didn't really sit right with me at all. The whole movie, pretty much every line she said is played for laughs, and to me it seemed like the only reason is being because she has a very thick Vietnamese accent, and for some reason Payne thought this would sit right with audiences. Now, my audience did laugh at this. There were a couple points where, yes, I did laugh at her character, but really thinking about it, I am not at all happy with the way they played this out because I think her character actually is quite interesting. I think they could have dived into some really good stuff with her character. But the movie, again, they play it all for laughs. And again, I think it's mainly because we keep following Paul in this movie. The movie stays very Paul-centric. Like, how is this benefiting Paul's life? How is this turning things around for him? And after a certain point, we start to realize this guy is honestly really boring, and there's really not much to his character, despite the fact that he seems to screw everything up, and he wanted to use this as a means to turn his life around. So, yeah, these characters are very one-note. But the problem isn't that they're one note. The problem is that even though they're one note, the stuff they're given is far more interesting than what we saw in the beginning. So it does feel very much like two completely different movies, and it just doesn't really gel well, especially the direction they take Chau's character was so out of place. I don't know why I decided to take it in this direction between her and Matt Damon. It really doesn't work at all. And the third act, I think, completely fell apart. I did not think it really worked out well at all. So, like I said, a lot of stuff in this movie is very much lost. Jason Sudekis, I was really looking forward to his role here. He's in the movie for like 2 or 3 scenes. He's really not in it that much at all, and again, that was very disappointing. I want to see a lot more with Jason Sudeikis' character, and there's really not much with him here, unfortunately. So yeah, that also very much did disappoint me. As far as cinematography here is really great, honestly. They play a lot with the visual imagery. Like, for example, there's a great scene where when he first wakes up, they show he is awakened to, he asks for a snack, and he is met with this huge, giant saltine cracker that honestly was very clever, and I wanted to see more of that stuff. But like I said, after they skip a year later, they don't really do much with that, and I think they could have. They could have done a lot more with the idea of the way the characters view things now that they're 5 inches inches tall could have been a really cool concept, but they don't really do too much with it, and like I said, just didn't really work for me. The score I really do like. It's very playful and comical, and you know, it's a wacky score. It's a wacky concept in general. I think they did handle that pretty well. The editing is, again, a huge problem here because the movie at points does definitely feel like a TV show. It feels like different TV show seasons. I'd say the first half of the movie, that's season 1, Paul trying to turn his life around. It feels like we skipped from, you know, maybe the first 2 episodes of season 1 to suddenly the season premiere of season 2, and it just didn't really work out. And again, I hate to compare it to that. I'm trying to judge it as a movie, and as a movie, it just does not work. It feels like there's so much missing from it. It feels like they could have dived so much deeper into things, and they just don't. And like I said, the movie in general really left me feeling very hollow. I don't really know what Alexander Payne was trying to do, and Han Chau's character, as much as I do like her acting, the way they handle her character honestly did make me feel very uncomfortable, and I don't get very offended a lot. You guys know this. I don't really get offended a lot. There have been a few movies that I do definitely get offended with. There were parts of this movie that legitimately offended me. Like, I really was not okay with the way they were handling this character, and I don't think it's gonna sit well with certain audience members at all. My audience seemed to enjoy it. They didn't seem too offended by it, but really thinking about it, it makes no sense why Payne decided to go in this direction, especially, like I said, when he is covering topics that are quite progressive and really focus on us kind of overcoming these issues as a society. Racism is such an underlying issue. I don't know why he decided to portray Han Chau's character in that specific manner. Guys, Downsizing is not a terrible movie, but it's close to one. The last half of this movie is honestly terrible. It goes into some really dumb directions. It feels like a movie that is just very confused. It's very jumbled. It doesn't really have much of a structure beyond the first, like, I'd say 30 or 40 minutes. After that, I think the movie completely loses its way, and it slowly gets progressively worse as it goes on, and it's way too long as well. It really did not need to be nearly as long as it was. It's a huge disappointment because Alexander Payne is such a good director, but I think this really is the first dud from him, and I am unfortunately overall going to give Downsizing a C-. I didn't really expect much from this movie in general, but I got even less than what I was expecting. I was at least hoping this would be a fun time, and in the end, it just left me feeling very emotionally hollow, and I don't really know what Alexander Payne was trying to do here. So overall, guys, we have Downsizing overall. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie overall, left your thoughts in it. Like I said, guys, really not worth it at all. I honestly don't know why it got so many Golden Globes, especially Han Chau. I don't know why she was nominated. She's good here, like I said. I think she definitely does have a future for sure, but I don't really know why she was nominated for this role, especially. Just, it feels very strange, but that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.